Hello, I'm Dr. Betsy Blair. I'm a health psychologist working at the Aurora St. Luke's transplant program. And today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how to consider asking somebody if they might be a living kidney donor for you. So I'm here today with Denise, and we're going to talk a little bit about this process. Hi, Denise.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
We're going to talk a little bit about how you might pursue asking somebody to consider donating a kidney to you. So I want to just talk about the process first, and then we'll dig into it a little bit more. When you're talking about living kidney donors, there's really two main ways of going about it. The first is that you may ask individuals directly, and that's what we're going to explore today. The second is more of a community awareness. For example, putting a notice in a church bulletin or an office newsletter, but we're not going to talk about that today. That will be at another time. So the first step, if you're going to be asking someone to consider donating, is that you need to go through the entire workup first. So as the recipient of the kidney, you would go through a workup, all of your doctor appointments, go through the selection committee process, and be actively listed for needing a kidney. That's the point where you could begin to think about asking somebody to donate to you. When you're on the list, you're then waiting for a deceased donor kidney, but kidneys, unlike other organs, allow you to possibly have a living donation instead. So the first thing to do would be to really educate yourself about what it would be like to be a donor, so that if you're asking somebody to be a donor, you know what you're asking of them, and you can answer their questions, or at least their most basic questions. So you need to learn, and your transplant coordinator can help you with all of that information. We're ready to educate people in that regard. Then you want to start thinking about who possible donors may be. They can be younger or older. They could be family members or not. You don't necessarily need to be related. So each person that you think about, you want to consider, are they in essentially perfect health? Because a donor will only be accepted as a potential donor if their health is close to perfect. What's the person's lifestyle like? What's their stress level like? You don't want to ask somebody who is already overwhelmed with life's demands. This would be too much for them. And then probably the third thing is you would want to look at that person's support. Are they somebody who can help them recover after surgery and go through that process? If you have ideas of one or two or more people that you'd want to think about, next, and I think this might be one of the most important parts of the process, is you need to realize that you need to be prepared to hear no. You shouldn't ask somebody if you aren't prepared for them to say no to you. If it would break your heart, if it would make you feel so let down if they said no, then I would suggest you don't ask them, because you're really risking the relationship and doing some damage to the relationship, and that's not something you'd want to do. I like to compare this to proposing marriage to somebody. Most often, when somebody proposes marriage, they give thought beforehand. They don't just blurt it out, although sometimes they do, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But most often, I think it's good to have it well thought through. And I think in general, most people don't propose marriage if they expect the person to say no, right? They
Correct.
think there's a pretty good chance that they'll say yes. So in that sense, this is very similar to that. So if you think about people that you want to ask, and you're prepared to go through the process and hear them say no, then I would approach one of them individually and ask if there's a quiet time and place where you could talk. You don't want to do it, well, you don't want to tweet or text them, that's a question. And you don't want to do it in a hallway or at a family gathering. You want to do it more in a setting like this where the two of you can talk, think about things and not be interrupted and not feel rushed at all. So then you would want to ask the person if they had time to talk and sit down. And the first step is you would want to tell them your story. You may or may not know I have kidney disease. You'd explain through that process and that you're on the list and now you're looking at people who may consider being a living donor. Then you would briefly describe what the process is of what a donor would go through. And then I'm going to point out that the most important verb I'm using here is consider. You're not going to ask somebody to donate you a kidney. You're going to ask somebody to consider donating a kidney, because they need to have the time and the freedom to think through this process very carefully. You want to remind them that there are many steps and many obstacles through this, so that if somebody were to say yes at this point in time, that doesn't mean that they're going to go through the process, because they need to go through a complex medical workup and a psychosocial workup at the same time. So if somebody is interested, and even if the person says, yeah, yes, let's do it. Let's get right on it. You need to thank them and say, we need to sleep on this. You really need people to take time and think through the decision and talk with their family members as well, because this has a ripple effect and it does affect a lot of other people. So if after sleeping on it, if the person that you ask says, yes, I'm interested in pursuing this, then you need to be prepared to give them the name and number of the donor coordinator in your clinic. At that point, what I would suggest is you would say to the person, thank you very much. Here's who you call. At this point, I'm not going to call you. I'm going to wait for you to call me. So you move at your own pace and let me know if I can help, and we'll just move forward from there. Okay? If the person says no, and then you would probably be surprised because you wouldn't have asked them if you expected them to say no. You need to be prepared to be very courteous and say thank you very much. Thanks for thinking about this, and I appreciate that you gave me some thought. And then leave it at that. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Any questions right now?
How does the whole process begin?
Okay. If somebody were to say yes, you would give them the contact number for the donor coordinator in your clinic, who is not your coordinator. Okay, you have a coordinator in the program as a recipient, but we have a separate person. We keep these two sides separate. You would contact her. She would set up an appointment for you to come in and meet with her and the nephrologist, the kidney doctor, to first talk about it. But the very first step when you contact the coordinator is that you would have blood drawn, and we would do this very basic matching to see if your blood type is compatible to the recipient's. So if it's no, then that's not going to work. And if it's yes, then that's just the beginning of a very long process.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Denise, would you mind role-playing this with me? Could I practice
Absolutely.
asking you to be a donor?
Absolutely.
All right. Denise, I've asked you if you could come and sit with me for a minute because I wanted to tell you about my situation that I'm in. You may or may not know that I have had kidney disease for quite a few years. And over the past year, it got worse. And I have had to go through a whole medical workup to be listed to get a new kidney because my kidneys aren't working any longer. So I'm on the list and I'm waiting for a kidney from a deceased donor. But I also have the opportunity to ask people who might be willing to be a living donor. With kidneys you can do that. You can't really do that with other organs. So in real life I would give you my long story. Now I'm going to just pretend that we've gone through that and get to the point of me saying I'm on the list and I'm wondering if you might consider talking with me about being a living donor.
I would consider.
What would you like to know, or how could I explain this to you the best way?
How does the process begin?
Well, the process begins with me once we've decided that you really do want to do this, because I don't want to decide today. I want us to sleep on it.
Okay.
But if you do decide that you want to consider this, I would give you the name and number of the donor coordinator in our clinic. And she's not my coordinator. There's a special coordinator just for potential donors. You would call her. She would give you some information, and you would have some initial blood work done. The blood work will let us know either you could donate or it's the wrong match and you couldn't donate. And so that's really just a trip to a lab for blood work.
Okay. Once the lab work's done and say we're a match.
Yeah. Then you would come into the clinic and you would meet with the donor coordinator and one of the kidney doctors. They would do the first examination, a general examination and history with you. And then from there they'd make plans of all the other medical parts of this. Everything that happens to you is completely private to you. I won't know any of that's going on. And your coordinator, as I said, will be different than mine. Okay. So there's a lot of steps through here. And one of the things that's important to know is that many people will pursue being donors, but they can't actually end up donating because they have some medical situation that maybe they even weren't aware of in their bodies. The two most common are that people have high blood pressure or diabetes, or they have a strong history of those things in their families, which could put another person's kidneys at risk, and they wouldn't be the donor. So lots of people who pursue being a donor start the process but find that there's some complication to prevent them from moving forward. Let's have you sleep on it tonight.
Okay.
Talk with your friends and family, anybody else you want to talk to, and let me know if you want to move forward with this. Okay? And if you don't, that's okay too.
Okay.
I appreciate you giving it some thought. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.